David Littleproud, welcome to 7:30.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Who blew up the coalition, the National Party or the Liberal Party?
We got to a position in the National Party room this morning after negotiations that have been going on between Sussan Ley and myself, predicated on the fact that we couldn't get comfort that key policy areas that were secured in the last Parliament, that were important to not just the National Party but to people of regional Australia and changing their lives for the better, could not get an ironclad guarantee because of the processes that have constrained Sussan Ley in wanting to re-engage with her party and being able to give me that assurity, my party room that assurity. And we felt that it was an untenable position in terms of walking away from those policies. They are key policies that we fought for and are important to us and the people we represent. So we've done this in a respectful way, in a transparent way, in a way that also respected the personal circumstances of Sussan, allowing her to drive the timeline and the negotiation and discussion because of her personal circumstances.
All right, let's talk about this practically, because at the moment, of course, no one is actually walking away from anyone on the Liberal side. None of the policies that you have given as reasons for the split are genuine deal breakers for the Liberals. So why would you push through such a drastic outcome?
Well, that's not the guarantee that we could get from Sussan Ley, because Sussan wanted to go through an elongated process of policy formation that would have to restart effectively what we did over the last 3 years.
But let's just go through them just to be clear for the viewers. We're talking about blowing up the coalition after 38 years and making the opposition less effective. You say that the issues are nuclear as part of the energy mix, divestiture powers for supermarkets as a last resort, an off-budget fund for the regions and mobile phone access renegotiation agreements in the bush. These are all policies that you would anticipate the Liberals would support. Are you claiming otherwise?
Well, we couldn't get an ironclad guarantee that they would be, and that all of those were ones that could be secured. And I made it very clear after the discussions with Sussan. I expressed her words and her written format to the party room, and they didn't get the comfort that they were looking for on these key areas. And we were in a position that Sussan obviously wants to announce a shadow cabinet. To do that, there needs to be a coalition agreement. And these were basis of what we were predicating our position on, which was on policy. And those were the policies that I made clear that while we got to an agreement last term on those, they still remain important, and that we didn't want to get to a juncture in 12 months' time where one or all of those couldn't be agreed to.
All right, just be clear.
We would find ourselves in this situation now.
Just be clear, David Littleproud, which one of those policies do you think the Liberal Party would actually not support? Because they're all Liberal Party policies, they all fit with Liberal Party philosophy. Which one were they going to turn their backs on, do you claim?
Well, I'm not going to air that on your program. That's a matter for the Liberal Party to work through, and if they can get to that juncture, then that obviously is the basis to move forward. But that's not the confidence that we could get, and from the discussions I had and what I was able to present to the party room, both in written form and in verbal form, from the negotiations, was not that we could provide to the party room.
Is this really what this is about? If you peel off a couple of those policies that they're important, but they are minor in the greater scheme of politics as they stand at the moment. For example, the renegotiation of service agreements in the bush, they were going to have to be done after the entry of Starlink. The off-budget fund is not a very large amount of money. You could assume that you would get that. Again, divestiture powers, you could assume you would get that. Nuclear too. Are you saying the Liberal Party would not support an agnostic view on nuclear as part of Australia's energy mix?
Well, I couldn't get a guarantee on all those that I presented to the party room from what I was provided. And to say that they're not important, I'm sorry. If you want to live in regional Australia today, there's people's lives that are being put at risk.
Just to be clear, David Littleproud, I didn't say that the policies weren't important. I said that when looking at the condition of politics in Australia at the moment, you are talking about blowing up the coalition for a policy that you could reasonably expect the Liberals to support.
So in the scheme of politics, Sarah, are the people of regional Australia, they do not count? Does their safety about having the ability to pick up a mobile phone when they're in danger and it working, their ability in a cost of living crisis for a young family to be able to have childcare places created for them in regional Australia, for us to be able to train our young people in regional Australia to be doctors and nurses that we need, are they not important enough that we should stand principled by our values of supporting them? I'm sorry, yes, in the scheme of the big political atmosphere that is Canberra, it mightn't mean much to people, but to us and to me and to the pledge that I made to not just the people of Maranoa, but the people that voted for the National Party, I'm going to stand up and make sure I leave a legacy because their lives are just as important as anybody else.
I think you're.
I hope,
if I may
that
just,
we'll get there.
If I may just jump in, I think you're misunderstanding me there. I'm saying you would have an expectation that the Liberal Party would support every one of those policies. So the question remains, are they really the reason for this blow-up with the coalition, or is it that the party that you represent wants to drop the net zero emissions target?
No. The decision is predicated on those 4 topics. That was what was put to the party room, and we met on Friday after initial discussion with Sussan. I put those 4 topics that they felt were important before we even talked about shadow cabinet positions or anything out. That was the key policy positions that needed to be determined. We were going to work through those in a considered way, but they were lines in the sand that were going to change the lives of the people we represent. And I hope that the Liberal Party can get there, and I think hopefully they will. But Sussan has made a commitment to her party room, and rightfully so, as she should, as I've made one to mine, that she wants to go through a longer process of discovery of those policies, whether they fit her philosophy and her party's philosophy. And if they do, well and good. But I'd rather do this now and be upfront and honest than in 12 months' time and we don't get to that juncture. And we're sitting here with the same set of circumstances and we don't have a coalition agreement. I think now is the time to look one another honestly in the eye, to say to one another, this is what is important to each other and this is what we need.
Can you honestly say that this decision has nothing to do with the Nationals' policy on net zero?
Yes, because our position at the moment is to support net zero. So nothing has changed with respect to that, and whether it ever changes or not is a significant question, whether it does or not, but that'll be determined by the party room. Because you've got to understand, Sarah, there's no unilateral decisions in the National Party room. It is one of the collective, and that's how I lead and will continue to lead. And we never shirk away from any debate or discussion in our party room. You're not allowed to anyway. Let's
talk about some of the very serious consequences for this. In terms of there ever being a possibility that the coalition can be put back together again, there'll be, I think, 10 or so positions that will now go frontbench or shadow cabinet positions that will now go to Liberal members of Parliament. They're not going to want to give up those positions, are they?
Well, that's a matter of future discussions, but we've made a decision knowing the consequence that we signed up to. This is why it's a matter of principle and policy that we've made this decision around these key areas that we believe will change the lives of regional Australians. So those are consequences that were discussed, understood, and we still got to the position we did.
David Littleproud, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And now to the leader of the Liberal Party, Sussan Ley. Sussan Ley, welcome to 7:30.
Terrific to be on the program, Sarah.
Did you blow up the coalition?
Absolutely not. I'm very disappointed that the Nationals have chosen to walk away from the coalition, but I remain very respectful of David Littleproud and his team, of every individual in the Nationals party room, their friends, their colleagues, and we've worked together over many years. As we go forward, the door will always be open, and I know David has said that from his perspective, and it certainly is from the Liberals' perspective. The coalition can be reformed in the future, it should be reformed in the future, and we are stronger together.
Let's park the idea of the future and just stay with how this happened. David Littleproud just made the argument that you could not give him sufficient guarantees on those 4 policies. Is that what happened?
There were a couple of areas of concern, Sarah. One was that we were being asked to adopt policy positions before I went through the process that I committed with my party room to undertake. And that's a compact that I have with my party room, but also with the Australian people following a serious defeat on May the 3rd. We accept that with humility. I know that the Liberal Party going forward needs to respect modern Australia, reflect modern Australia and represent modern Australia. And that does mean an honest look at all of our policies and doing that with the support, the involvement and, you know, the real deep engagement of everybody in the party room. Also, in the discussions I had with the Nationals, I wasn't confident that shadow cabinet solidarity would be maintained going forward. We can't have a situation where members of the shadow cabinet sit on different sides of the parliament in different votes. So we agreed, and it is with great regret from my perspective, and I believe also from many in the Nationals party room, that we would go our separate ways.
Let me just, if I may, just ask you a question about that question of cabinet solidarity. That's obviously important. Why were the Nationals seeking to not have to maintain cabinet solidarity? Was that to do with net zero or any policy related to climate change or reducing emissions?
Well, that's a question for them, but obviously the concern would be that it might relate to climate policy and it might relate to other policies where we should present a united front to the Australian people. And I want to reflect on how we've done policy successfully in the past, including in the last Parliament, but certainly since my time, since walking in the door of Parliament House, in a very strong coalition with John Howard and John Anderson in 2001, which was that we do develop policy separately and respectfully in our party rooms, but when we come together, we have those conversations. And as anyone who's sat around, Sarah, as anyone who's sat around a cabinet or a shadow cabinet table knows, they can be vigorous, they can be fierce, and they should be. But when you step out of that room, you present a united front in terms of policy.
Sussan Ley, come back to how this happened then, because it's clear that the Nationals are aware of the policy process that you had undertaken and that it's to be understood after such a devastating loss. So how did we end up in the position where the coalition was blown up? That's what I'm trying to understand. Why did it go wrong and who is responsible for that, you or David Littleproud?
You're using the term blown up and you're looking to apportion blame, and I'm not. I've said that I was willing, I was at the table, my team was ready to form a coalition, and we had issues that we needed to discuss. At a point in that debate, the Nationals decided that they wanted to walk away from the coalition, and they've given their reasons. And I respect those reasons. I wish they'd stayed to have a longer debate, and I wish we'd arrived at a conclusion where we have the coalition on foot now. But having said that, we haven't parted acrimoniously. We won't have massive differences.
I think we're aware of that. We've heard the pair of you say that your doors are open and language like that. But just to come back to the matter at hand, what were the policies that caused the breach in the end? Because it's clearly not credible that it was over service agreements in the bush or the small regional fund. What was the policy that caused the rupture?
It wasn't a policy as such, it was a process. And I don't believe that the coalition agreement itself should be hostage to individual policies. And the approach that I made to David and his team was that we would stand up the coalition. We would announce that it was on foot, so to speak. We would even allocate shadow ministries according to the usual formula, and we would go forward together and we would develop our separate policy processes where they are separate and come together and articulate those policies in the normal way going forward. So that was the offer I had on the table when the Nationals decided that they wanted the commitment to 4 areas that they've spoken about, and they wanted that up front. But as I said, Sarah, that would have been breaking the compact that I had with my party room, but more importantly, with the Australian people. Because what I have front and centre is that we are here to work very hard for the people who did vote for us, but also the people who didn't, to present a coherent, alternative, modern, fresh narrative. And to do that, we need to start to engage on policy now, but we don't want to end up, we need to develop the policy agenda together.
How much actual policy difference is there on those 4 policies that David Littleproud named as being the reason for this dramatic, historic break?
Well, for me to give you the clear answer that you're obviously seeking, I would have to know where we would end up on those policies, and that would be a betrayal of the process that I'm very committed to and my party room is very committed to, and that is that we work through very carefully, methodically and with plenty of time, because what I've said is we will take the time to get this right, and we'll do that now, and the Nationals will undertake their own processes, and at some point in the future I'm optimistic that we'll rejoin as a coalition.
Well, we'll come to the unscrambling of this this unholy egg in a minute. Did David Littleproud warn you that this would be the outcome if you did not give him what he wanted, which was a guarantee on those policies?
Well, when you undertake discussions around a coalition agreement, obviously, by definition, the outcome is that if you don't reach agreement, this is what happens. So clearly, that was what was on the table with respect to the discussion.
And how much support do you have within your own party for the position that you've arrived at?
I have great support, Sarah, and I will continue to talk to my party room as I did this afternoon. I convened a meeting. David spoke to me this morning and then announced that he was making a media appearance to announce this probably some 45 minutes later. So I convened an urgent meeting of my party room and we talked about it. I informed them clearly and transparently what had taken place. This is my commitment to them every step of the way.
Yes,
as
but
leader,
what about their commitment?
Together.
What about their commitment back to you? Because this clearly puts the Liberals in a much weaker position. It empowers the Labor government under Anthony Albanese. What does this do to your authority within the Liberal Party?
I don't
Given
agree
that your very first decision leads to the ending of a decades-old coalition.
I don't agree that it puts us in a weaker position. I agree, however, that we will all work hard as the parties on the other side of the chamber from Labor. And that was something that David and I also discussed, because we do have great alignment. And while our policies are up for review, Sarah, our values are not. And I know that when it comes to developing policies with our Liberal Party values front and centre, many of those values are shared by the Nationals. So there will be joint agreement going forward. But the process that we will now undertake is a sound one, it's a sensible one, and I believe it will give the people who are looking to us now to say what is the Liberal Party agenda, how will they meet us where we are, what does the modern Liberal Party offer us. It opens the door to all of those discussions that we now need to have. And I think it demonstrates to the Australian people that we're taking very seriously what they told us on May the 3rd.
Did you go into these negotiations with David Littleproud believing that the Nationals' policies were a drag on the Liberals' chances to win back particularly urban and suburban seats at the next election?
I wouldn't use those terms because it wasn't about the individual policies. That we needed the space to commit to policy development that I have committed to my party room and to the Australian people. And that if the Nationals were unable to give us that space and as a result decided to walk away from the coalition, then that's disappointing, but that's a decision for them.
John Howard's obviously very distressed about what's happened to the Liberal Party. What is it about winning elections that you understand that he doesn't?
John Howard and I agree on very many things, and as I said when I came into the Parliament in 2001, I watched the coalition in operation under John Howard and John Anderson, and that effectively was the model that I would like to see going forward. I am a committed coalitionist, and I really mean that, and we are stronger together, and John Howard and I would agree on that. So from my point of view, it's about making sure this time apart is valuable and that we do what we agreed to do with the Australian people, because we're here for them. And while a lot of this conversation seems to be about what happens inside this building and arrangements and opportunities, for me that's not what it's about. It's about making our case very strongly to the Australian people that we are up for a new agenda, a fresh approach, doing things differently to meet them where they are. And I am delighted to harness the talents and the smarts of every single member of my Liberal Party party room to do exactly that.
Sussan Ley, lots more to go on this story, but thank you very much indeed for joining us today. I'm grateful. Thank you. It has undoubtedly been a very big day in politics. So joining me now is our political editor, Laura Tingle. Laura, I hardly know where to begin. Why don't you start by telling us what the actual consequences will be of this moment in politics?
Well, I think the consequences will be, Sarah, that we'll see the Liberal Party now liberated to move back to the centre. And I think all of the indications from what Sussan Ley was just saying indicate that that's what she plans to do. And I think the Nationals, by doing this, have basically taken a completely separate message from the election to the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party said, we've just been completely annihilated, we've got to rethink who we are. The Nationals have said, no, we're right, and our vote hasn't changed, so we stick where we are. Now, this seems like a delusional position to be in for both sides, but it's got huge consequences, obviously, for the two parties, but also for the way our politics more broadly goes from here. For a start, we had, in the last parliament, the government wedged in on both sides from the left and the right. By doing this, the coalition has now widened the field for Anthony Albanese in the centre, and it also opens up his opportunities for negotiation potentially in the Senate, because you'll have a split between the Liberals and Nationals in the Senate as well.
And then what happens to, I'm sure they're not going to want to talk about this right now, but with the next election in mind, what happens to Liberal and National seats? Are we going to see, if it can't be put back together, and it looks very difficult at this stage, would we see three-cornered contests? What happens to people like Bridget McKenzie with her Senate ticket? What are the electoral consequences of this great rupture?
Well, I think it's too early to say what's going to happen in terms of three-cornered contests in the House of Representatives, but if they don't get back together, at the moment, Senate tickets are a joint ticket between the coalition parties. Bridget McKenzie won't get back in if it's just a national ticket, as opposed to being number 2 on the coalition ticket in Victoria. So it's a real Yosemite Sam action here by the entire Nationals party. And the thing that's most confusing here, Sarah, which I think is very important for people to understand, is it's not a coalition between two parties. It's a coalition between 3 parties: the Nationals, the Liberals and the LNP in Queensland, which under Peter Dutton was the absolute power force of the coalition. It has had all the seats. It's still got this predominant number of seats. In the House, half the people in the LNP sit in the Liberal Party room, half the people sit in the National Party room, and more importantly, the constitution of the LNP says that it is a division of the Liberal Party. So how does this work where some of the LNP is splitting off and is being counted by David Littleproud as the Nationals? It's a really confusing situation, and it's the first time this has happened since the formation of the LNP. In 1987, of course, we still had the Nationals in Queensland.
So what happens to those individual MPs? Where will they sit when Parliament finally resumes?
Well, the Nationals have basically been reduced to a rump minor party in the House of Representatives. Sussan Ley says the Liberals are the official opposition. Well, they might be, but they're pretty redundant for the time being. They were pretty redundant already, just given their numbers in the House, less than a third of the House of Representatives seats. They've basically both consigned themselves to being observers in the House of Representatives.
So can they put this scrambled egg back together again? Can you put it back into the shape of a nice smooth egg?
Look, it's hard to see at this stage how it could happen, not because of all the problems about the fact that they're going to have a shadow cabinet made entirely of Liberals for a while, but because there is this fundamental problem, and it's disingenuous of the Nationals to say, well, you know, it was nothing to do with us that the Liberals lost the election. Peter Dutton basically had policies that were designed to keep the coalition in one piece. He was letting the Nationals tail wag the dog. They may not be talking about a different position on net zero, but as Matt Canavan, the National Senator, the LNP Senator, said famously, the nuclear policy was basically an affectation to make the LNP, to make the net zero policy look like it was working. So all of those politics still prevail, and the Nationals have to make a decision about whether they are prepared to just become a minor party in the future, or whether they develop a Senate First Party as a Senate First Party, or whether they make some decisions, because the Liberals certainly have no choice but to go back to the centre, I think.
Does net zero loom over this decision, do you think?
it looms under the decision, I think would be the way I'd put it, because they haven't really been able to deal with this issue, and it's a division that's been papered over by the nuclear policy, but it has never really been resolved.
All on for young and old. Laura Tingle, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Sarah.